All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Vinland Saga discussion. Specifically, Merphy and I are going to be talking about the last, two-thirds or so of book 12 and book 13. This is the latest that just came out in January. So very excited to talk about these. Merphy, it is so wonderful to see you. Welcome and welcome back from what looked like a really wonderful vacation.
Thank you. It was wonderful. You are right.
Yeah. Well, we need those every once in a while, don't we?
Yeah, and maybe another one next month would be okay. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to convince my bank account that it's not so convinced.
Yeah. Well, anyway, at least we have some great books to talk about. And
Yes.
I'm excited really to talk about this. And it's not the last of Vinland Saga, right? There's going to be a couple more of these books, perhaps. Do you know more about that than I do?
No, I don't. I think we pretty much all assume that this is the final arc, but as far as
Okay.
how long it'll be, a lot of times the mangaka can't even really properly predict that because they're week to week too. So, they're
Ah,
writing as they go. And
okay.
of course, Yukimura has a clear vision for how he wants to finish things, but it's kind of hard to say exactly. It's kind of like starting a book and saying, my page count will be this. But
Right.
once you write it, who
Yeah,
knows?
I
So
see. Okay. Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
good to
we
know.
don't really know, but there are probably people in our audience that are further ahead than us. So just a reminder that we have only read the published books, the month-to-month chapters we don't have. Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Yes. So because these come out obviously in Japan and in a more I guess week to week or whatever format or month to
Yeah,
month
it's
or
month
how
to
that
month
works.
for Vinland
Month to
Saga.
month.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they get bound up and at some point translated into English and then we get them that way, something like that.
Yeah, I think for Vinland Saga, I think the official translations don't actually happen until they're bound into
Okay.
volumes, whereas some manga like One Piece gets an official translation every week with every new chapter,
Oh
but
wow.
that's not every series gets that kind of treatment.
Okay. Yeah, that's very special. So
Yeah. So there's fan
well,
translations that people can read, but that's not what we are doing.
okay, yeah. Well, anyway, I'm glad to be reading it. And so, what are your general thoughts on the last half, two-thirds or so of book 12 and book 13? How did you feel about these?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a really strong start. He just kind of like launched into it, which I didn't really expect, especially after the last arc that moseyed its way into the point. With this one, it was like, all right, we're in Vinland now, so let's go. And yeah, it was very. I mean, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see them moving the land and really starting to establish their home. Obviously, with this being very rooted in history, we can kind of see the direction that it's going in. But Yukimura always has his own personal slant to the story, as well as his own commentary that he wants to bring to the story, which he's already begun. This entire series has always been about freedom, breaking chains, societal expectations, and how that doesn't fit the individual every time, and all that kind of stuff. And he's going straight into all that as well, always continuing those theme points and looking at them from another angle. So it's a really strong start for me.
Yeah,
What do you think?
beautifully said. Yeah, I agree with you. And I actually found there were a couple moments, particularly in book 13, that were obviously the fruition of earlier stuff that Yukimura had been doing, but I was actually very moved by a couple moments. And we'll talk about those. I was in tears a couple
Yeah.
times in book 13, actually. So just beautiful stuff. Whoops, sorry, you froze there for a
Yeah,
second.
no, I completely. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. What did you say?
No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, there
Oh,
were
yeah.
some, especially near the end of 13, that I was just, oh, really, really powerful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there were, a couple. We'll get to those in a bit. And so, yeah, I think thematically, brilliant stuff. He really wove those in well. And emotionally, storytelling wise, there's not a ton of action.
Sure.
And there's kind of goofy humor. The humor doesn't always land for me, but obviously he has succeeded in getting me attached to these characters because this really had a big emotional impact on me. So I thought that was really well done. So let's talk about a couple of those themes that get picked up on in the last part of book 12. We noticed that Thorfinn, his new emerging worldview, which is in part a legacy of his father's, is becoming challenged by a couple different people in some ways. One being Ivar, and the other a bit later is Halfdan. They had objections to Thorfinn's idea of pacifism, I guess. And so, but they have some fair. What did you think of their arguments? Of Ivar's and Halfdan's arguments?
Yeah, I'm really excited to discuss this point because it's interesting because we don't know what direction Yukimura is going to land in. Obviously, he's an advocate to pacifism. The question is he going to go all in and say, like, this is the way, Thorfinn's right, and prove that in the way he tells this story? Or is he going to land in a more discussionary, where's the line sort of place? I personally landed a more discussionary, where's the line? I don't think you can talk through every single aggressive situation. Unfortunately, I would love it if you could. So I view Thorfinn as a very doe-eyed individual who was far on the side of violence and now has overcorrected to the point where he's setting himself up to potentially leave himself as well as the people he loves incredibly vulnerable. Going to have to reckon with that and find where that line is. And I'm really curious to see him explore that and to see where he lands. I think that seeing Thorfinn overcorrecting so much is very understandable from the history that he has. But at some point, that has to be brought up, that has to be challenged. And he's being challenged verbally, but he needs to be challenged physically as well. Even that ideology of, like, you know, the sword, a man who has a sword will be tempted by it and will be moved by the magic of the sword, like all that kind of ideology. It's like, on the surface, that sounds great. But then when Hild challenges him and says, do you think your weapons made you do what you did to me? Like, that's a great challenge. That's something that needs to be addressed because it's humanity that does this stuff.
Yeah. Yes, that is such a pivotal moment when she puts her crossbow on him in challenge and says, "Wait, what did you say?" You know.
Like seeing him starting to blame something else other than himself and saying, "Say that again. Say that one to my face." And it's like, yeah, do say it to her face. Does it feel right? You know.
Yeah, I think you're right about him having the zeal of a recent convert, right? We see that a lot in life where somebody goes from one extreme to another. He's beautiful. Thorfinn is beautiful. And if we were in an ideal world, you know, it would be wonderful. His vision is beautiful, but is it something that can exist in this world of practicalities? And Halfdan's point is, look, we need the law to keep society together. Right. And for the law to have any teeth, you have to have some force behind it. You have to have the threat to keep certain people in line, and that's how it is. And is he wrong? Is Halfdan wrong about that point? You know, it's tough to argue against, actually, as much as emotionally here we would like to think Thorfinn is right, but here I'm not sure.
I would love for Thorfinn to be right. That would be a killer reality. But, you know, we even see just in this very peaceful land that he's already creating, among people who have openly chosen this ideology, this new life, are still having infighting because it's still that selfishness that rises up and says, no, give me mine. I need to take care of my own, instead of this, you know, kumbaya kind of life that Thorfinn wants, where we all help each other, we all just give freely. And I want that too. But like, it's hard to create a world where a large group of people can live in that kind of community. Not to say that it's impossible within smaller communities, but the bigger you get, the more different kind of people you're going to get as well.
Yeah, you're so right. So we have some foreshadowing that things might not be as wonderful as Thorfinn hopes, but there are some beautiful moments in the last part of book 12 as well. one having to do with an old character, Siggy, who makes a really wonderful return, and we can be happy
Yeah.
for Siggy. And
Yay!
the other being Cordelia. So, what did you think of Siggy's appearance and how he's doing? And then we
I'm
can talk
always
about
happy to see
Cordelia.
Siggy. Killer
Yeah,
haircut. He looks great.
looks
He's
much better with his new
yeah.
haircut.
He's a
Yeah.
proud dad. I love to see, Halfdan just still kind of himself trying to reckon with his life as it is, offering this to Thorfinn not knowing what to do. And then takes one look at his grandpa or at his grandson, and he's like, he spoke. He's a prodigy. He inherits my land.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thorfinn's like, about that thing? And Halfdan's like, go away.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so I love that Yukimura does such a good job of kind of amplifying a really human thing and making it comical, but still like being a mirror to
Yeah.
reality. And it was a sweet, fun scene. And Siggy just kind of chuckling and being like, "Oh, Dad,"
Yeah.
It's so I thought it was really sweet.
I agree. And it's fun to see Halfdan being vulnerable. And he's older now too.
Mhm.
So there's a kind of, I don't know. I mean, Halfdan has done some awful, terrible things. I mean, he
Mhm.
took a guy's face off with his chain. He's a slaver. He's not the nicest person. And yet seeing him joyful in that moment, I was sort of happy for him. So it was very effectively done, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. Very much so. Yeah,
And
and then Cordelia,
yeah,
um,
really, what'd you
yeah,
think of her?
yeah, no, she was, I mean, she's adorable, just from
Yeah.
her very introduction, how she just is so timid and kind of peeking around the corner and all of that. And like I said at the beginning, it's just furthering that discussion that's been discussed the entire time that, these boxes, these societal ideas that we put people in, it doesn't always work out for the individual. And Thorfinn just offering freedom and extending the hand. And yeah, I'm excited to see where he takes her. What about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. And in that, maybe we can see where Thorfinn is kind of right too, though, because Thorfinn is the one who is most at first willing to accept Cordelia and say,
Mhm.
yes, you're one of us. Yeah, you're a misfit, or you don't fit into the boxes, and you can come with us and be yourself in
Mhm.
this new beautiful world that we're going to found. And I
Mhm.
love that. Whereas you have Halfdan, who is very rigid and no, these are the boxes and you have to fit in them, right?
Mhm.
So in that sense, yeah, maybe Thorfinn is naive, but he's right, I think,
Mhm.
in a beautiful way. So I think that's an interesting thing. You also have a very nice sort of flashback, if you will, to his father. And that moment when Halfdan comes to collect the slave, it happens again, right? So there's an
Mhm.
interesting parallel there where Halfdan comes to collect another slave, in this case,
Mhm.
Cordelia. And we
Right.
see how much Thorfinn has changed and how like his father he is in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And we do get all but confirmation on who Cordelia's father is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's a character that we love and adore, and yet continues to personify the very ideals that we're challenging over and over again, which I think is it's really amazing that he's able to so effectively do that.
Yeah, Thorkel is somehow so vivid and admirable. At the same time, when you think about it just for a moment, kind of awful, really.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah, just
pain and the suffering that he's inflicted, and you can see it what he's done to his own child,
mhm.
right?
Oh, well, and his wife too. They both,
Yeah,
or I guess I don't know that they're married, but they both are hiding themselves and their lives from
yeah,
him
yeah.
because of his rigid, like, this is the Viking way.
Right. Yeah, very old school. A couple other interesting things in here, and then we can move on to book 13. I thought Gudrid had some sweet moments.
Tell me about it. Tell me about what you think of Gudrun in this arc.
Oh, I mean, the idea that she would be a little bit jealous of Hild
Mhm.
because she feels inadequate next to Hild, and we need to talk about Hild and her development here, which is, I think, kind of beautiful, and seeing how she's become a teacher. She's become a somewhat reluctant part of the community,
It's
and
she's it seems like she's a happy part of the community until you address it, and then she doesn't want that name,
yeah.
but it feels right for her. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, that's perfect, actually. And I thought it was interesting because they clearly, Gudrid and Hild, like each other. But there is this thing of with I think part of Gudrid's response to Hild is her anxiety for Thorfinn, but also there is a part of her that feels somehow inadequate next to this very brilliant and accomplished woman.
Oh yeah, Hild's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she can do pretty much anything. She's strong, she's capable. You know,
yeah,
Gudrid, when she first joined the crew, she was being sick over the side, and she's accomplished so much in her own right, but it's not so physical in that, you know, there's a problem, it's immediately met like it is with Hild.
yeah.
So some of that insecurity cropping up is understandable. How much time has passed since we last saw our characters?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you can tell by their haircuts that time
Right.
has passed, and
Time has passed, and Carly has grown up.
yes. Oh, yeah, that's the best indication. That Carly looks like
Right.
about a toddler now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I would say more because he's speaking in full sentences,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
not that toddlers can't do that, but you know, he still has that baby talk kind of slant, which by the end of book 13 is gone as
Yeah.
more time has passed. So
Yeah.
that's a really good indicator. But to me, I read it like as if it had been a year or two.
Uh-huh.
And so there was a piece of me that's like, why is Gudrid acting like this now? Like
Hmm.
her jealousy of Hild seemed to come like right now. We're reading, so now it's here. Whereas, like, wouldn't that have come over a period of time, over a stretch of time?
Yeah.
As well as her kind of like blushing. I don't know. Listen, I love her. And I resonated with her personal individual arc in the last arc so much. Not the
Yeah.
last arc, the one previous. No, the last arc.
I think it was the last.
So much. And so now to see her kind of like the blushing, like silly, you know what I mean? I'm like, no, I know her personal journey is all but done, but don't make her this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's partly a consequence of having that gap, I guess. We can't see
Yes.
all the interactions, and we're getting a skip. And so for all we know, that's been growing in her, and then she had this sudden realization. But I see what you mean, and I hope that we'll see her doing something significant in the next couple books that
Yeah.
come out.
There's
She has an
definitely
important role to play, as you know from reading the
right,
original sagas.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's lots of opportunity, even just within this setup of her challenging her own jealousy or her own insecurity and being the leader's wife in like she can also step into leadership and she can also, you know, do that kind of stuff too. So there's definitely opportunity. I just love her so dearly. I don't want her to just be like the meme because her arc is over, you know?
yeah, yeah. I hear you. Yeah, for sure. Well, and things are really getting rolling, as you said. So when we get to book 13, we actually get to Vinland after a few, little adventures along the way, and some
Yeah.
bit of tension growing among the parties and that sort of thing. But we do get there relatively quickly. And I thought it was a really kind of the fruition, a great moment, a kind
Yeah.
of a wow. Along with the characters, I felt the promise of this
Mhm.
new world for them. But there are inhabitants there already, which is
Mhm.
something we need to talk about, obviously.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big part of this, but that comes a little bit later. We had a couple characters who came along reluctantly, I guess Bug Eyes, for example, who doesn't
Poorly.
exactly, yeah, I mean,
I hate to see, I mean, I know that that's just life, but I hate to see him fading.
yeah, well, he's sort of forced into this, and I think it's a good thing for him because he finds his role, I think, in this new adventure because he becomes the translator, sort of
Oh,
reluctantly.
Buggy.
Once again, he becomes useful. He's the seafarer. He knows the oceans better than anyone. So even though he's sort of being dragged into it, kicking and screaming, he actually finds, I think, a purpose for himself there. So I have hope for Bug Eyes.
Oh yeah, I do too. I do too. And it's actually really nice to see him making that one-on-one connection and starting to like pick up patterns and say, "Oh, that's what that means. Okay, well, let me help you." And them learning together, which I think is a good role for him. I think that he in the last arc became the comedic relief character, so it's good to see him taking on a role again. So yeah, I really like that. I also really like the balance. As we're having Thorfinn's ideology challenged, we're also seeing where it's actually being very useful. Like
Yeah.
when the people wanted to split, and
Mm,
Einar's reaction was, no, we need to force you to stay on track. And Thorfinn is thinking around it. He's thinking about it tactically, strategically,
yeah.
and he's thinking about how do I help other people be able to still be a part of this while still acknowledging their own needs and desires, which I think he did a really good job with. And when they landed at the second point and saying, no, this is someone else's territory, I'm not going to steal someone else's land.
Mm,
Um, Creating those offerings and trying to come peacefully and all that kind of stuff. It's showing the benefits of his ideals as well as challenging the extremes of them.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's really well said. Sort of another element in here that I really enjoyed was the inclusion of mythology. And there were some moments like when Bug Eyes that made me think of how he saw Jormungand, the world encircling serpent, right?
Oh, right,
In
right,
in the ocean, and no one else saw it, of course,
right.
and we don't know what that was exactly, but yeah, I love that that's there. There's that scene with Hild later on when she meets the bear spirit in the forest.
Mhm.
And there's the shaman who
Mhm.
accesses a vision of the future, which is terrifying to see what the Europeans eventually will do to his people and to this land. So I like that. I like where Yukimura kind of goes for a little bit something different in this one. We
Yeah.
had nods to Valhalla and that sort of thing
Mhm.
before, but to me, this is the most fantasy-like of installment in the series so far. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think he does a really good job of honoring some of the traditional beliefs, views, uh, cultural things for the people indigenous to America, for natives.
Yeah,
I know that dreams are really significant, and like these animalistic spirits, like all of this is,
yeah.
I think, showing that he truly is honoring this culture that he's writing about.
Yeah, which doesn't surprise me because he's done that all along with the Norse stuff. And
Mhm.
so I was pleased to see how he included the language of the Mi'kmaq, I think is and you'll have to forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, but the people that Thorfinn's party encounters on what we now call Prince Edward Island, which is part of Canada.
Mhm.
I believe they're something like the Mi'kmaq. But at any rate, I agree that he has tried to learn about this culture and present them in a way that is three-dimensional, that
Mhm.
we get their side of things. They're
Mhm.
observing these strange newcomers at first from the forest, and we get their perspective. And I love how um, Yukimura gives us a sense of the different cultures, but even just with little details like giving us a different font when they're speaking, right? It's all in English, and I assume originally it was all in Japanese, but it's all in English for us. But the different font tells us this is a different language, this is a different
Mhm.
culture. I thought that
Yeah.
was very respectful.
Yes, I like that. I like that, as well as when they are speaking face to face, he doesn't continue to utilize a different font. He actually utilizes different language,
Yeah,
which better illustrates to us the language barrier, but also is, again, just that honoring that he's taken the time to include that.
yeah, yeah. And there are some really interesting cultural encounters. And it also brings up the big problem with this whole plan of founding this paradise, which is, well, there are people there already with a culture, with with the homes, and when you
Who
come
are
in,
utilizing the land differently.
you're using the land differently. You're cutting down their forests. That's a
Right,
threat, right?
right. Yeah, and it's interesting because as they swapped foods and experienced each other's different, the disc that they gave him, which was such a
Yes.
fun game. I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as they swapped foods and cultural things and are truly trying to embrace each other and live in harmony, we're also seeing that even with that, it does affect them because they utilize the forest as it is. And the spirits of the forest are significant to them and things like that. And so while they're trying to live in harmony, them utilizing the land in the way that makes sense to them does heavily affect the way the native people were utilizing the land themselves.
Right.
So having that balance while still having a language barrier is tremendously difficult.
Yep. And we just see, I think, at best, how naive it is to assume you can come to some place and found a paradise without think. And Thorfinn does the best he can. I mean, he tries to establish peaceful, as you said. He does the exchange of gifts. He tries to go gently. In
He
the
allows them
initial,
to observe him without needing to confront anything.
exactly. He avoids confrontation, so he does a brilliant job, as much as you can when you're taking over someone else's territory, to
Even
be
when
nice about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Even when they approach him with weapons, he doesn't interpret that as, oh, you're coming to me with violence. He interprets it with the most generous lens he can, which, you know, if he did look at that as a threat, then he would have instigated violence when they were. I mean, I don't know what their intent was, but it certainly didn't seem violent. You know, they were just showing, like, look at how we use the tool you gave us.
Yeah, that was a great moment. And of course, the others are misinterpreting that encounter as they're observing, and Ivar is ready to get his sword, and and that's when Cordelia sees the forbidden sword. So that, I mean, it's really well done. I think how Yukimura is exploring what can happen when two cultures who don't share a language come together, and the misunderstandings that can develop, as well as the ways in which they can connect with one another. And it's and here again, Bug-Eyes actually plays a significant role in his relationship with the young apprentice of the shaman. I don't know if she's named or not, but that's an interesting encounter where they're learning each other's language. And you can't help but see the human being in the other person, I think, when you're learning their language. And right? I mean, that's
and attempting to understand their culture and honor them. I absolutely agree. There has to be a connection that forms from that if you're both coming at it with a desire to understand each other. And that's clearly what they're doing here. And I think Ivar is a good example of those conceptions. You know, he's expecting violence. He's waiting for Thorfinn's ideals to be challenged, which they will. But because of that, he interprets a situation that could easily be interpreted as violent. You know, them approaching Thorfinn with weapons in hand easily could be interpreted that way. And that is the interpretation that he brings. And because of that, he instates fear in the people around him. And that's such a good illustration of how these kinds of situations can escalate so quickly. Yeah.
In spite of the fact that you and I and modern readers can recognize the problematic nature of colonizing, which is what they're doing, there is something really beautiful about this village, this little world that is being founded. And this is one of the moments that really grabbed me. It was partly because of Einar's reactions. But there's the whole callback to, of course, Arnheid, and how they named the place Arnheid Village, and they had found this sculpture over in Greece that reminded Einar so much of Arnheid. I just thought it was beautiful, that callback to her and the ideals that they're trying to live by, and how linked they are to her as someone who inspired them. So what did you think of the callback to Arnheid?
Man, that's so funny, because after I finished reading this, I went on my Discord and I asked people, what did you think about this arc? I wanted the discussion. And somebody mentioned that specifically the Arnheid section was so powerful to them and like very emotional. And I didn't actually feel emotions out of that. So I'd really love to hear do you want to kind of unpack how you felt about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm pretty sure I can pinpoint why it was so emotional to me. It was very much Einar's and Thorfinn's reaction, that they were just standing in front of the statue and you could feel the emotions just radiating from them. The loss, I mean, Einar is a very beautiful character, and he's a very sensitive soul, and he loved her, and you can see that. And this is for him the way he's keeping her memory, this is very much about the ideals that he and Thorfinn share, but it also is just as much for Einar honoring the woman that he loved. And I just felt the beauty of that. And while everyone else is like, wow, cool statue, this is neat, there's a whole personal, emotional connection that these two have to this woman. And it also just brought back my memories of her tragic story and the loss of her. And so I think all of that just wrapped together in this one moment just got me somehow. It's hard to explain why a particular moment has such emotional resonance, but I think that's the best I can do.
No, that's great. I think I recognize and appreciate the fact that they wanted to bring Arnheid here. They wanted to take her away from this life that she had and to bring her to the land of freedom that they had envisioned. They had envisioned her there too, and she wasn't able to come because of the violence of the world and because of the things that they were trying to build a better world away from. So honoring her by bringing her to Vinland, the only way that they were capable of doing through this honorary way, I thought was really great. I appreciate it. It didn't bring a lot of emotion out of me. It was just more of, I see why this would be significant to you to bring her here in the only way you were able to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. We had another callback to just a little cameo, really, but
I'm excited to get more of him in this arc, to see what role he plays.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, he is somebody that Thorfinn brings out in a counter argument to Ivar and saying, I know somebody who has used force and violence who
hates war.
Yeah, but he hates war. He doesn't like it. So that was another sort of facet to this whole debate about how do we found an ideal society.
Yeah, and it's just that once again, they have the same goal, but they're doing it by different means. And it's someone who wants to end violence and wants nothing to do with it, but sees violence as a necessary means to get this world that's going to be better. Whereas Thorfinn is doing the exact opposite. So yeah, it's just continuing that parallel. I'm excited to see what he's going to do with it in Canute's situation.
Yeah. And speaking of violence, I thought it was really interesting how differently the settlers view their activities of cutting down trees and sowing fields and all that. They regard all that as creating, as building.
Right.
Whereas the natives are watching this, the Mi'kmaq are watching this, and it's destruction to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's removing a vital resource of their life, the animals that they hunt, that they live off of, as well as disrupting the spirits within the forest that are valuable to them. So it's disrupting their life as well as their resources, which, both are attempting to have life here, and neither is attempting violence, but it's just the two different cultures not able to I think the language barrier is such a big factor here that they're not able. I'm sure if they could communicate and say, hey, we don't want you to take down all these trees because these trees bring value to our lives, then Thorfinn would say, oh, okay, we'll go further south, or we'll split up again, we'll split our crops, we don't have to take, you know what I mean? Like I really think that the way Thorfinn approaches the situation, he would find another way if they could communicate.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And you get that initial encounter between them, which is, it's sort of ominous, but then as we said before, Thorfinn handles it really well. And there's this exchange of gifts. I love the maple syrup. As a Vermonter, I had to grin at that moment when Carly's like, honey, So, but it was nice. It was actually pretty. And then you get the handshake there, pretty neat stuff. I love, there's some beautiful moments in there too, a recognition of humanity, which
I'm so modern. As soon as Thorfinn left his first gifts and when they left their gifts, my first gut reaction is, don't eat something that someone you don't know gave you.
Uh,
It could be bad. Like there could be something in it, but it's like,
yeah.
that's just, it's just me being a 21st century person that's like afraid of food that was just left somewhere.
Yeah. But in spite of that, we do get indications that things could go the wrong way very easily. You have the sword, the presence of the sword, and you have the kids arguing. And that is a parallel to the adults arguing,
Yeah,
right?
in just the same immature manner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was really cool how
It was really
Yeah.
good. And Carly's very simple way of viewing conflict.
Yeah.
And you know, the time will heal all wounds. And then whenever Thorfinn tells him, yeah, not always. And he's just like, oh, well, okay then. Well, if that's not the truth, then I'll go handle it the way that will rectify the situation. And for Thorfinn, obviously the consequences are much higher, but it just feels like such a big hurdle. And to see it handled so simply in Carly, I thought was really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And then Hild goes and steals the show for a lot of the last part of this for me. And there's, as we mentioned before, that encounter with the bear spirit, which I thought was beautiful. And her relationship with bears and with animals in general as a hunter is one of mutual respect or of respect and an understanding of nature that most of the other characters in her party don't have. I mean, she's also got the interestingly, she's the one with the engineering know-how as well, you know. So she's a complicated character, but I really love where she goes as a very much a loner who is on the periphery in some ways of this community, but is also very much part of it. And until we get that just beautiful climax at the very end, which was probably my favorite ending to a Vinland Saga book. I think I can say that. What did you think of that ending?
Well, first, going back to the bear, I
Sure.
think the way she handles trauma is also very unique to her character,
Mhm.
which is addressed in this book that, you know, her father figure was killed by a bear, which he expected. He knew that at some point the circle of life would come around that way. But, you know, she holds this grudge against Thorfinn for what he's done to her in her life. And then as far as the bear, she could easily have that same sort of like bears are evil, bears are violent, bears, you know, like have this very one note look at them. But instead, she sees bears for the individual need. She sees that this bear was still hunting because it wasn't able to get the food it needed, that it wasn't attacking humans or animal or humans, and it was just trying to meet its needs and then hibernate. And she left it at peace because there was no need for violence there, right? Yeah, it's a really powerful. She's just she's one of my favorite characters in the
Yeah.
series. She's
Yeah.
so layered and deep, and her way of thinking about things and processing the world is so deep. And from there, we go to her then finally accepting Thorfinn's apology, accepting that he has changed, and one of my
forgiving.
patrons, yeah, forgiving. Can you pull up the panel?
This one or a little later?
No, the one of him on his knees, and she's got her hand.
Oh, goodness. Okay, yeah. And of course he breaks down here.
That's the one that got me. That panel right there of his reaction, just bursting into tears. That's
Same
the
here.
one.
Same here. And I love how she takes off her whatever that bandana thing, and we see her whole face for the first time. It's like she's not hiding anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's taken off the persona of the hunter now, and she's just accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one of him kneeling and her hand on him, one of my patrons put that side by side with one of their first interactions, which was him kneeling and her over him.
Oh, isn't that brilliant? Huh.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Huh.
Yeah. But yeah, his reaction to
And
finally
there's that final panel.
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
That's the last panel in the book, which is just perfect.
It's incredible. Yeah, his reaction to finally being forgiven and how much that meant to him and her. You really feel a weight lifting off of her too, to not be holding the anger in her anymore and to not be waiting for him to fail, but to finally just think she accepted her role in this community, accepted her role as a friend and not a potential foe, and just kind of releasing that trauma that she's been wearing on her shoulders for so long.
Yeah, what a gorgeous place to take that arc. And she
Yeah.
calls him a true warrior, going back all the way to Thor's from the beginning. Just a great callback there, I thought.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Just tying it together, so many things in that beautiful moment. And for me, in a way, I know there's going to be more because there are some loose threads, and obviously we have to find out what happens, but this could have been a beautiful ending, you know. It is one beautiful ending, I suppose.
It is one. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely true. Yeah, like you said, there's a lot more to address. There's a lot more to reckon with. I think, especially the storyline with the natives, we have a lot more to do here. But as far as these characters that we've traveled with, this Thorfinn still needs to have his ideals physically challenged and figure out where that line in the sand is for him. But this feels like the ending of his arc of violence that was still following behind him, as well as the end of Hild's arc of carrying it.
And vengeance. And I mean, we have redemption here. We have forgiveness. These are themes that have been running through the entire series and brought to this, just, I think, just golden moment here. I just think it's really, I don't know if Yukimura planned it all in advance for this moment, but I just feel like so much has come to fruition right there. So that's got me just, I was like, I had to.
It was such a powerful ending to the book. I was kind of nervous because I know that the way they make these books is they just wait until they have enough chapters and then bind it up and go. And I don't know how much thought is put into what the final chapter of a book will be, but I suppose it's the end of the volume. So Yukimura planned that this ends this volume.
Yeah.
And he ended it in such an incredible place.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed. Is there anything else from books 12 and 13 that we missed? I'm sure we missed some things, but anything that you would like to bring up or address?
All the really biggest points.
I think we did pretty well. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Merphy. I have to thank you again for getting me to read this series in the first place, because this has been such just a lovely, beautiful journey for me. And I've enjoyed every moment of it. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and say book 13 is my favorite so far.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. I don't know if I have a favorite book. I don't know how I could sort that out, but book 13 is definitely up there.
It's a beautiful one. I like some beauty and hope. And of course, it's not all just sunshine and rainbows and all that. And there's I think there's some stuff to sort out there. And we know from history, this settlement doesn't work out, right? I mean, this is not going to be a permanent thing. So we're gonna have to see how Yukimura figures that out, right? So that'll be interesting.
Absolutely. I'm very curious to see how he handles the ending of this story.
Yeah, same here. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. And Merphy and I are starting a new series, and that is going to be
my sad copy.
Her slightly damaged copy of Vagabond. We'll tell you the story behind that on Merphy's channel when we talk about the first bind up of Vagabond. And so that is what we're going to be up to next. So everybody check that out. So you'll want to hear what happened to that poor copy, I'm sure.
Just sad.
All right, Merphy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.